So, while we're doing this, the first slide, which is a really big slide.
I can only imagine.
Yes, please. Was the agenda, which you already have, which I don't have, because I wasn't going to print anything. And we're going to get into the general update. So I'm going to try to do this while I'm actually trying to do that. And
Is it that BEP Wi-Fi or?
well, so that was one of the things I was going to talk about. But I know that's on the list.
So this was planned.
You might notice there's like a blinking green light up there. And at some point, someday soon, that will actually be working, other than the blinking green light, which has been working really well for the last week. Nothing is working. I don't understand.
Receiving the pirated unauthorized copies of the video of the Wayside Cleanup Advisory Committee meeting by people streaming through their own.
They're watching it in Russia right now.
Well, even that, it should have been downloaded. So, we do have, the building is being wired for Wi-Fi. So at some point, and this should be like really helpful to you guys, and this is, that it will be a public network, there will be signs out there saying, you know, here's the ID, here's the password, I assume that it will be password protected, and we'll be able to allow everybody to go online. And hopefully that will help me as well, because now the plug-in network isn't working for that, so we're trying to do this through the little, yeah, don't look at any of these things.
Full-size render is awesome.
Are you envisioning a future where we only have like the little robotic things that stand in, where we won't really be here, but we'll just send our little robots?
I am waiting for that day.
The Council of Star Wars.
Yeah.
This is,
We'll be at that weird bar.
The tiki.
Yeah.
Cocktail on weird bar.
Yeah. I see a pineapple.
that's actually software.
Sure, Bob.
Yeah. It's not software that just got
Drinks near you.
Cocktail buddy instead of gas buddy. Oh, that's not work.
Do you have an AV person for the AV person? I know that. I'm saying you need like you need a backup.
All right, so we have the Wi-Fi. We have hiring, things like that. At least I have some control here. That which I just downloaded. This. So hiring, as you in budget and things like that. As you probably read in papers, like I did. The budget was eventually passed. There is some question about potential budget shortfalls. A number of our budgets within the department were subject to cut plan ideas, which were then overridden by the legislature. So we're in this position where the legislature has authorized, I believe it's essentially a level funding of the department going forward, but there's some uncertainty about exactly how much revenue will be coming in. So we're going to be very conservative, I think, as we move ahead in actually spending the money until we know that the revenues are going to meet the expectations. So I think in the short run, how are we just not responding? In the short run, we put on a hiring freeze. So in the past, we talked about hiring a number of people, and we have hired a number of people. We're very lucky to have them, and we hope to keep them. Don't you, Brian? one of our new hires that we're very happy to have. But we're expecting some more. So this is not an uncommon situation for us. Hopefully it will be temporary, but as you have seen in the past, there may be some shifting around of personnel depending upon agency priorities. And that's so things that we are working on may shift because of that. So there's that. We kind of related to that, unfortunately, is the question of continuing retirements, as we're an aging program, and part of the reason we were trying to hire some mid-level staff was to replace those of us who are old and on the way out. Me, hopefully, not soon enough. But we do have a couple kind of major retirement announcements, one of which in Wayside Cleanup is Jane Parstick, who heads our federal program on the Superfund sites, the federal facility sites, the formerly used defense sites, the record corrective action, our relationships with EPA for the underground storage tank, the LUST, not the underground storage tank program, the leaking underground storage tank program. I'm on the verge of being happy. And that has nothing to do with Jay retiring. So Jay is leaving, and also kind of for the department, kind of a broader issue is Nancy Seidman, who's the Assistant Commissioner for the Bureau of Air and Waste, is also leaving towards the end of the month, and that's a big loss for the department. As she is a big focus on obviously air and waste issues, but particularly air issues as we move ahead this coming year. So that's going to be hard to replace as well, particularly when we have hiring freezes and minimal ability to bring in new people. All right, so Mike, how is the streaming going at least?
Not great.
Okay, I think if I plug this in, we're going to see that on the screen. Wow. I know, wasn't that worth waiting for? Okay. So, like that. And we want to move down. Come on. Well, that's all you get. Okay, so it's just going to be slow. It may do it again because I hit it a couple times. General updates, that's all the stuff that we're going to be talking about today. And as you noticed, and I'm going to calm down now, and I'm going to be a little bit more focused on one thing rather than both. So I apologize for that. I'm going to be doing most of the talking from DEP side. So we have the benefit that this is a small group because it's the end of the summer. I forced you all to move to the front by shutting off the back room. So you're not as far away as you usually are. And we can use this to have more of a discussion than we even usually do. And that will help me because I don't have to keep talking, and it will help you because it's really this is a good time to take stock of what we're going to be doing in the coming year, as well as kind of the ongoing things. And so it's a good opportunity. It's kind of relatively informal today to have that discussion, and we'll all be nice and close, and I think that will work better. And then next meeting we can go back to the more formal sort of thing, and that's why I'm not wearing a tie, because this is informal. It's not. Okay. Susan Chapnick had asked for the PFAS people update, and she's not here.
Maybe she's watching.
She's Susan. Yeah. Okay, so this is my general update. See, I told you Wi-Fi was on it. There we go. Budget, staffing, and hiring. So we're working on that. One cool thing that you may or may not realize, but we're finalizing, and we'll probably be literally rolling them out in the next week or two, is In the past, for many years now, we've had a program of purchasing spill trailers stocked with boom and other equipment and pre-positioning them along the coastline as part of the Oil Spill Act. And that has been very successful. We've been working with the coastal communities, doing training on how to deploy them, identifying sensitive receptors, resources along the coast, and practicing how to go out and put out boom in order to protect them in case of an oil spill, so that we know what we're going to do beforehand rather than making it up as we go along. And that has worked out really well. We are now in the process of, or have purchased, and will be rolling out very soon, additional trailers from a different funding source, not the Oil Spill Act, which has to be marine, to buy a set of trailers for inland water resources to pre-position near the Quabbin Reservoir, along the Connecticut River, along the Merrimack River. I'm missing something. Along the Taunton River. I want to make sure I hit everybody. Sudbury. Along the Sudbury River. Any other? Along the Saugus River. But we're still working on where exactly we're going to place them. And the relationship that we have with the local communities is that they store the trailer, they protect it, they make sure that it's protected from vandals and thieves and all of that in a secure place, and they're committed to participating in the training and providing help to the surrounding communities, to making the trailer available for other communities that need it. We will restock it as equipment is used. It's our trailer, it continues to be our trailer, but we're loading it to the communities for their use. So it has worked very well for the marine communities, and we're doing the same thing for the inland communities, and we'll be working on training, or continuing training that we have already started for how to deploy boom along rivers and lakes and ponds. So that's kind of exciting. Training, and the 5-minute moments is my reminder to talk about training. The LSPA has just put out their fall training calendar, and part of their goal, as we heard, was that we wanted to make sure everybody could look far ahead and plan it in advance, and essentially a semester at a time, if you want to look at it that way. So we're doing our part with that, and you'll see on there the return of the audit training courses, for example, which is, on our part, is a big time commitment, part because we want to have the small classes, we want to have that interaction, and we're going to be doing it a couple, 4 times over the course of 2 days. But it's well worth it from our perspective to have that interaction and do that training, and have the LSP community and others participating with the auditors in a session and format that is not an enforcement conference, where people most often meet our auditing staff. So I really like it, and we'll be doing those this fall as well. The 5-minute moment things are this little side thing that we've been doing on trying to find other ways of reaching out to people. So these are short 5-minute videos. I don't know how many you people have already looked at them. They're not really fancy, they're not overproduced because we don't have the equipment, but it's basically what we have, trying to pick off small bite-sized pieces of the MCP that can be described in 5 minutes. A question like, what's the difference between a release and a site? Okay. Are they interchangeable? Are they the same thing? There's one on brownfields, kind of a general overview of brownfields. There's one on how we develop soils, method 1, S1 soil standards. Part of the ones that we've done have generally come from specific questions that we've gotten, and after you spend several hours explaining to in many cases reporters about how our program works and kind of the intricacies and the quirks of the regulations and why it actually makes sense, but perhaps not on the face of it, you need to understand it a little bit. You think, well, let's just do a short little video about that. So check them out. They're on the YouTube channel, which if this was working better, I would show you, but it's the same place where you go to watch these videos. And they're short, so, even if they're bad, it's only 5 minutes. And part of the reason I bring up, because, you guys don't do these because, they're relatively basic, but my vision of it is that you'd have one kind of overview of the MCP, and then you'd go down a level of detail, and you'd have a handful of videos, one on what is notification, what is site assessment, what is cleanup, what is closure, and then take the notifications, you do another level of detail, 5 minutes on what are 2-hour notifications, what are 72-hour notifications, what are 120-day notifications, and then go down another layer of detail and get more and more detail as you go along. So we're looking for questions and information kind of on the whole range of what are the most generic things, big questions that you could point a client to when they say, well, what is this MCP and why are you making me do this? Here's 5 minutes on the MCP. And then we have reporters asking, well, how what is this standard? What is this based on? How do you calculate it? And we can send them to that. There's one on that we did recently, partly because of questions that we were getting from reporters on the difference between COM 15 and the Simple Soils policy. Very helpful to just say, well, go watch that, and then come back with some additional questions. So one of the things, and this makes our life easier, hopefully. That's part of the goal. So that instead of spending all this time explaining things, we give them a running start looking at the videos, and that conserves our time for other things. So suggestions for what you think we should do with these.
You mean topics?
Topics, or guest stars, or other ways to make. I say that somewhat jokingly, but I don't want to do this all myself. The brownfields one, I had a hard time getting somebody else to actually do the audio, and as you'll see, or hear, I wasn't successful. So guest stars actually would be a good idea, and then we'll go around.
Well, I was thinking Bruce Springsteen, but
If you can get it.
and he could sing it, No, I have, I don't know if you can answer it in 5 minutes, but I'd like to know where you are on the topic of when people sample indoor air and they ascertain that it's not a fuel oil, say it's a fuel oil release, and it's not complete migration pathway. However, it is building materials that are contributing. How then do you make the residents feel comfortable that, well, it's not an MCP problem, but, so it doesn't matter, but it still is over a guideline, or not standard, but guideline.
It's not our problem, it's your problem.
So I'll take that, and I'll go and listen to the details to remind me. But I'll take that to be for things like indoor air, kind of how there's the potential for some kind of risk communication aspects of this, and explaining to particular residents, but maybe your commercial occupants as well. But what does it mean to have this? What do we expect to find? I can see one of the valuable things I think that we do in the indoor air work is, and hopefully you guys do as well, is having that conversation up front about the expectations of what we might find and what it might mean, so that they're aware of it beforehand, rather than it appearing to be justification and you're avoiding the issue when you get the results and then try to explain it away. So having something like that kind of on a video, for example, it makes it a little bit more official. It gives it would give us kind of the ability to standardize some of that risk communication, hopefully in a way that is effective, because it can be very difficult to do. And explain things, not just the indoor air, but you could look at almost any of our exposure pathways where you're talking about what is risk and what are residual levels and why do we believe it's safe to have arsenic at natural background levels, even though you might otherwise consider them high. There are a whole bunch of variations on that. So I'm sure there's a way of having a general discussion and then breaking it down into more detailed examples. So if people are interested, they can get more and more information as they work their way down.
Hi, I think it would be helpful to talk about SRMs and CEPs And I think there's not only a lot of confusion in the regulated community, but also at DEP, to be honest. Because there can be situations where you do have an SRM for vapor migration, but it's actually not a CEP because it's not a routinely occupied space where you're exceeding the threshold value. So I just had a circumstance like that fairly recently, and it was kind of a long, arduous discussion and process. But I think there are a lot of subtleties and complexities, even like Carol's saying, and so I think that would be good to talk about SRMs and CEPs in particular in terms of notification and IRS.
Okay, we're going to go around, but a couple things. One, at some point, we're going to move on. And two, as you leave and go away and think about this, there are examples of like specific things that, and everybody's inclination is kind of the most recent problem that you had. Wouldn't it be great to have a better explanation of it? So, and I understand that, and I feel for that. But part of it is kind of where we want to place our priorities in doing it. And there is a certain benefit. One last thing came off yours about this, because I found that things like the COM15 and simple soils discussion was equally helpful for DEP staff introducing new things like COM15 that perhaps they haven't thought of before, and it saves me from doing a lot of roadshows to the regional staffs that people don't have time for. So it is, I do view that as a potential, also a plus for doing that.
Talk to John Show about that.
Oh, if we can get John to do that.
John doesn't think too much of complications.
So I think it would be good to have a 5-minute discussion on AULs in there, because that's an area where people doing property transfers find out about deed restrictions and go, what are these things?
Yeah, I think that would be a good one, because you can start, very generally, what are our AULs and why do you use them, which would be helpful for the property owners that are being introduced to this instrument. And you can imagine working your way down to the details to some of the real estate attorneys, but details that I can't even describe because I don't know what they are, but I'm sure we can get somebody to do 5 minutes on it.
I guess to tie in with the inland oil spill trailers, tie that in with the training class, because I've heard nothing about, what is an LSP. And the reason why I bring that up is because, one of my clients could have this spill on the Ipswich River, and I show up and I got the private sector out there, the fire department, engineering, everything, and they don't know what an LSP is. And ultimately, at the end, I'll be responsible for that. So I think that that's key. And I know Jim Coleman did some videos earlier about privatization. So those two videos appear to me to be in like the top 3, privatizing, LSP program, and then continue with the basic education stuff. Some of this stuff is not going to happen in 5 minutes.
No, but the sum total of it would be, if you work your way through it. Right? The 5-minute thing is, you all watch YouTube and things like that. Yeah, how long do you, for videos that are 25 minutes long, how often do you actually go to the end of it? Minute. And the interesting thing is, I've got statistics. YouTube actually does good statistics behind the scenes, so you can see how many hits you get, how many people call up this video, and then what percentage of the minutes they watch. And it's great if you're watching it online, but I rather doubt a lot of people, not very many people go back to these videos and watch the entire 2.5 hours, which is one of the reasons why I try to cut them up into the different segments. So if you're really interested in soil, okay, maybe you'll watch that 20 minutes, but you have to cut the time. You have a short attention span. One more, then we'll move on.
LSP of record. I don't think there is an understanding, even amongst LSPs, as to what the LSP of record is and what the duration of being an LSP is and the implications associated with being the LSP of record. Can you remove yourself as LSP of record with just the notice to the department? All of those sorts of subtleties seem to still float around.
Can you get rid of your LSP would be the top. Sorry.
Yeah, so, and you might want to think of these in terms of like questions like that. The first two we did, which, and we've been numbering them, so the first two we did were on the soil standard derivation, and they were questions 67 and 68. To give the, nobody giggled at that, oh well. 60, yeah, the song,
We got it.
anyway.
We're not on the inside.
I thought, but it's an indication we want to do a huge number of them, but it really is answer, what is a question that can be answered, and maybe it's best to think of it in terms of the question first, what is an LSP, or how do you get rid of an LSP, or how do you develop soil standards, and then work down from there for the appropriate level of detail. One last thing on it is that I also think it would be a great idea for the LSP Association, think about, for those things about what is an LSP, and how can we help, and what do we do.
I already got it.
That may be something. Yes, but you need somebody to
I already made the note, Paul. She's next
We'll
year's
take care of that
president.
in the fall.
Exactly.
Next year's
Who's the movie
president.
star?
And then we can go forward. Site work, that's up there just to keep reminding everybody that we talk a lot about all of this policy stuff and all of the regulations, blah, 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 blah. But the vast majority of the work and the people that we have working for site cleanup spend all of their time doing site work. And so that is going on. And maybe one of these days, we'll have each region, talk about interesting site work that they're doing that isn't specifically related to, the vapor intrusion policy and how we're applying that at a particular site. More, kind of interesting sites that are out there. I know each and every region has, several that that make for good stories about kind of what's going on. And we'll cover some of those for vapor intrusion later as we go along, but yes.
With that, I would think you could do both really good success stories and the opposite, both of which would be interesting.
Yes, I mean, hopefully we're learning from everybody's mistakes, and everybody makes mistakes, or runs into things that don't work. They're not necessarily mistakes, but the regulations aren't perfect, the work that's done out there isn't perfect, and you find things that don't fit in the box, or they're surprising, and those are the more interesting ones. Quite frankly, we wouldn't talk necessarily about the ones that just go ahead and happen easily by themselves, and that is the majority of them. By the way, plugged program, that the fact that somewhere between 1,200 and 1,600 sites get cleaned up and closed out every year, and the majority of them kind of pass under the radar because nothing exciting is happening about them. I mean, that's the good news. Unfortunately, it's kind of boring. So we focus on the ones that don't fit in the hole, the ones that have don't quite fit the regulations, the ones that have issues with the site assessment, or a whole bunch, financial inability, or all of those litany of things that you know better than I do, but why it doesn't work out perfectly. And those make for interesting stories, and those are great anecdotes, but most of them are nice and boring, and we like to keep them that way. The other things are just to remind everybody also that we're doing things that are not, the department's doing a lot of other stuff as well. And part of my job is to try to make sure that, to the extent that we can manage it, that the waste site cleanup issues are kind of dealt with in-house appropriately, and don't create big waves, because quite frankly, we're dealing with a lot of really big issues out there that go beyond waste site cleanup. The lead in drinking water issues, the fallout from Flint, and the focus on the fixtures and the pipes, the service lines, particularly in schools. And there's a big push this fall to do sampling in schools across the state. That's going to take a lot of resources and time for the department to make sure that the children in the schools are in fact protected. The EO 562 process, which you may not be hearing about very much anymore. We talked a lot about it in the last couple of years. That's still going on. We're kind of finishing our process. There are reg packages that are going out for public comment that are being finalized. Waste site cleanup, as you know, had passed on this round because we had just finished a comprehensive review of our regulations. But the fact that EO 562 is winding down means that we are going to pick up, as was talked about at our last meeting and previously, with what had been called the trailer package. I know the LSP Association has been soliciting the ideas for things that you think that we should be looking at. We've asked for that. And as we come into the fall, we'll be doing, starting up that work, because there will be bandwidth within the department to focus on the wayside cleanup regulatory changes now that some of the other programs kind of have passed through the system. NIPT's delegation is another big thing that the state is looking into and evaluating whether we're going to be picking that up, and there's a lot of work to be done even before, if we ever get NIPT's delegation, there's a lot of work and effort to try to do it and lay the groundwork for that, and that's going on.
Talking to your colleagues in Connecticut who are thinking about dropping their NIPT's delegation, looking at what you're doing. I can't provide any detail at all, because in some of these meetings where the NIPT's delegation, the lead in drinking water, the Kane decision, which is the greenhouse gas emissions, and the Commonwealth lost a lawsuit, and we are going to be responding to that in dealing with the addressing the issues that came up and moving ahead with all of that, and being very general, because part of it, I said at these meetings, and I'm hearing it, and one part of my mind is saying, it's not my program. And I don't have a lot of detail about NIPT's. I don't have a lot of detail about the Kane decision, because it is not specifically waste site cleanup, but these are things that the department is struggling with, putting a lot of resources and focusing on over the coming year. And I know all of you have much broader interests than just waste site cleanup. So your participation in all of these, whether it's the Bureau of Air and Waste or water resources, I'm sure would be appreciated.
One point of intersection where the department could be helpful, if you have the ability to give EPA a nudge regarding the RGP, would be a good thing.
It's actually
sort of rolled into
draft.
And then the only other thing on this is IPASS, which you remember is our big reevaluation and reconstruction of our data systems. And you all know what IPASS stands for, so I'm not going to repeat it.
We're laughing on the inside again.
Yes. But those are the people that are on the other side of this wall, actually, that are doing this. And they're in the phase one of this is actually doing data systems for some of the water programs and the air programs, doing to their permit systems, bringing them up and surpassing what waste site cleanup does in BWSCAC, the ability to file online and to view things. A lot of that is now in the testing phase, and so we should actually be seeing some of these roll out in the near future for those other programs, and then at some point the waste site cleanup systems will be rolled into that as well. But we're letting the other programs get the experience and work out the kinks before we get there.